Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Dr. Jeff C. May, and welcome to another episode of Doctor's Orders, advice you should actually take. And in this episode, I'm going to talk recently about the loss of my dog named Atlas. And this is going to be a hard conversation, but one I think is so powerful. And why I'm even jumping into this is because I over the past week, so I'll give you the backstory in a minute, but over the past week, for those of you that are in the office and that listen to this and that are patients or wherever you may be, you know that Atlas has been a part of the office Advantage Health Center for the past 6 years. He's been my little buddy. He'd come in. He's been the best office dog in terms of his demeanor, his personality, and people loved him. We've had patients reach out, send pictures of when Atlas was a puppy and their grandchildren were younger, and so all of these things. And the reason I want to do this episode is that it has been evident to me, and it has become more evident that in the past week of sharing this, and then through the hard times and the tears and everything, is that everybody goes through loss. And inevitably, I always try and look at life through the lens of a lesson. And why is this? Why could this potentially be used for good? Because at the end of the day, we all deal with it. And so many of you have shared your stories about pets that you have lost or had to put down, and even loved ones, widows in the office, and doing that aspect. And so when we dive into this, uh, I hope you get something out of it, and I hope it brings you joy, because we're gonna look at this through the lens of, like, how can this be good? Like, how can we use this for good? Because inevitably, there are three stages in life. You're either going into a storm, you're coming out of a storm, or you're currently in a storm right now. And those storms of life we cannot control, and it's all about controlling the controllables. What can I do with my perspective? The responsibility to react. Like, you can't control how people interact with you, but you are response able to how you respond. And that's a hard thing. That's something I've sucked at my entire life for the most part. And I'm not saying I'm great at it now, but I will say I'm gonna honor um, my little guy, my office dog, aka Atlas, the Advantage dog, is I'm gonna honor that because he's so many good things. And we all know this if we've ever had a dog. So the backstory on Atlas, because people wonder and people want to know, is that he apparently somehow, and we don't know, this can happen in smaller dogs. He's a French bulldog, mixed with something, so he's a little taller. I always said he was like the athletic version of a French bulldog, and he herniated a disc somehow in his lower spine, and it went central into the spinal cord. So being a chiropractor, it's like, man, he was paralyzed. His back two legs were paralyzed, bowel and bladder. He no longer had manual control over. His bladder was something I had to manually empty and help him out. And we had a diaper, and we had all these plans to where, man, get him a wheelchair, do those things. So many patients reach out. Shout out to Luana. And then so many patients were always bringing treats. Like, this is the thing. Atlas was integrated into the office very, very well. And I had plans to saying, well, if we can keep him comfortable, about 50% of the dogs can come out of it. We were doing soft wave tissue regenerative therapy here in the office. We were doing cold laser. He was getting adjusted. We were doing red light therapy. He was getting acupuncture by a vet that was going to help him. So we had about 50% odds, and surgery gave him about 50% odds as well, and was like $15,000. And so we went the natural route, because it had just as good as odds. And over this past weekend, at the time of this recording, Atlas was no longer able to get comfortable. Rest was interrupted. There were so many things where, when an animal starts to suffer, that is not okay. And even though I figured, man, we could get him a wheelchair and we figure this out, and yes, it'll be more hands-on, but we're gonna figure it out, because his quality of life. It was great for like a week. Kids were home for spring break. They were able to spend some time with him. He was eating, he was drinking, he was doing all the dog things, except his back end just didn't work. And so Monday, or actually over the weekend, seeing him suffer, I made the decision, took him in and had him put to sleep on Monday. And so my wife and I went in together. And for those of you who have had to do it, it is so difficult. It just sucks. It sucks so bad. Like, shout out to Doug, who I know just recently went through this. I always talk about Doug. And here we are. We both had to put one of our best friends, to rest. And that's so, so, so hard. And so the point of this is that I'm going to give you some of the top three things that Atlas has taught me, and we're going to pay this forward. Because how many of you have been in a situation when someone passes away? So like, maybe it's you have a friend and someone close to them, their spouse or a relative passes away. And we always want to honor that somehow. And we want to say, well, I'm sorry or my condolences. But to me, that always started just feeling empty. Like you say, I'm sorry, but somebody lost a life. And so I started a few years ago, or I don't even know when, but I think it's about a few years ago. And I just started asking people, hey, what was your favorite thing? What was your favorite thing about Gary, who passed away? And the reason I ask, and I tell people, and I'm very delicate with this, but I said, hey, what was your favorite thing? Because I want to know that quality that stood out about them so that I can put it in my life selfishly and pay it forward, honor that person. Because a lot of times when patients would lose somebody, I maybe knew them or maybe I didn't know them, but in a way, knowing what their best quality was or what people remembered about them, I was able to honor that life that was lived and pay it forward and emulate more of those qualities. And they're always great qualities. And so those are the things that I maybe that helps you or encourage you that, if you lose a loved one, or just think of those best things and apply them, because the pain and the hurt you will go through, the mourning, the loss, like I still get choked up and shed a tear. My kids, they're doing great. They're going through it and they're all well, but like every once in a while, and that's kind of how life is. Nothing stops. It was funny the next day, um, everything was clicking along, and it's not about making it suffering, but about making it a lesson and moving it forward. So a couple of things, if you guys remember, I want to kind of reminisce about Atlas. Ever since he was a young pup, there's kind of a really, really cool chiropractic story in here too. But ever since he was just a young dog, he had a floppy ear. So one of his ears was up. You can picture a French bulldog. One of his ears was up, and his left ear was always like flop forward, and that was just his characteristic. It was Atlas, and everybody would say, "Man, I love that one ear," and it was unique. And no matter for the life of us, like when he was a young puppy, we tried taping his ear up because aesthetically we're like, oh, we want the ear up and do those things, but it just wouldn't do it. Well, funny story about the ear is that when we started getting him adjusted with an animal chiropractor, shout out to the Hawkins family down in New Ulm. We know them very, very well. And Sleepy Eye, his ear perked up. And so literally, so many things. And he was getting adjusted under his left atlas. That was one of the misalignments and the vertebrae that wasn't moving as well as it should, and corrected by a chiropractic adjustment. It was a beautiful thing. Whether dogs or people, guess what? Chiropractic works. And his ear would perk up. And over the course where, that last week we had with Atlas, I was like, I talked to my wife and kids, have you noticed Atlas's ear? And they're like, yeah, it's up. And I'd go over there and try and flop it down, and it would just perk right back up. And so clearly there was some nerve pressure there at some point that caused his ear muscles not to work as well. But we kind of chuckle about it because there in his last week and a half of life, his Atlas had 2 fully functional ears. But yet, people knew him with the floppy ear. And the lesson I'm taking from that is like, be yourself. Be yourself. That uniqueness that makes you embrace it, because we're all so stinking different. And so many people will look at themselves in the mirror and like, I don't like my nose. I don't like my ears. My kids give me a hard time about my forehead. They're like, oh, it's more like a 5 head. They joke where my barber has to stand on the balcony to give me a haircut. My kids have jokes for sure. But at the end of the day, that's me. Who cares, right? And so I'm going to remember Atlas with that floppy ear and be like, hey, embrace you. Embrace the uniqueness about it. Another thing Atlas taught me, and that so many of you have shared about your pets and your dogs or your cats or wherever it may be, is like, I think it emulates out of dogs especially, is that they're just so freaking amazing example of unconditional love and gratitude. Unconditional love and gratitude. Like you're always happy just to see you, just to be in your presence. And Atlas would always just want to be with. Like we joked about it where it didn't matter if it was a car drive. We just had to go get gas or so quick trip or whatever. He was just like, he just wanted to be with. He was just happy to be with. When we were in the office, he was happy to be here. When it was time to go, he was just happy to be around. And isn't that a good lesson and grateful to where so many times we wake up and we're like, it's Monday, or today's going to suck because of XYZ. Like, just be happy to be alive. Be happy to be here. Be happy to be now. And there's joy in that. So many of things in the storms of life want to rob you of that joy, and that there's joy in just being with. And that's one thing I remember Atlas for sure, is just being with. In fact, a good friend sent me a text, and this was classic, and I rolled laughing. Let me see if you guys get the point. But he asked me, he goes, who's your best friend, your wife or your dog? And he was kind of setting me up for this, right? And of course you want to say, well, your wife, you don't want to, those things. so the point of this was, he said, well, what would happen if you locked your wife and the dog in the trunk for an hour? And then you went and go ahead and open it up. Who's happier to see you? And I was like, oh boy, it's probably the dog is probably way happier to see you. I might have to duck and dodge a right hook and a left hook for my wife. But that was the thing in terms of, they were just happy to be with, happy to be around you. And that's something I can do better at. Like here, there's no script to this podcast today. There's no like, oh man, I mean to make sure is this or that. It's just like, I wanted to honor Atlas, the office dog, and give him a shout out, because man, he was just the best demeanor, the best dog, and truly just my buddy. And it sucks not having him around, for sure, as you go through. And so, one of the last things as I remember about Atlas is he would just, man, he would always, this is the one thing, this is just a dog thing, he would always greet you with a shoe. And so my family knows this. You wouldn't know this unless you were in my home. There are so many mornings over the past 6 years, for whatever reason, he would always, if you came home, you know how the dogs are always excited for you, and you have this little nub of a tail, and he just, the team here called him Wiggle Butt, because he just wiggle all the time. But he always, it's almost like it was like an oral fixation for him. He had to have something in his mouth. And so you'd get home and he'd pick up a shoe and he'd just carry the shoe around and he'd just be happy. And you try to take the shoe away from him and he wasn't mad or fight you about it, but he would just hold on to it. And so inevitably, for kids, lots of shoes, all these things, is that, getting ready for school, I can't tell you how many mornings over the past 6 years getting ready, the kids ready for school, they're like, where's my other shoe? And we would have to do this search around the house about like looking for the other shoe. So that's one thing I actually miss is all our shoes for the past few days have been exactly where we left them. And, with that, I guess the lesson I'm going to learn is no matter if it's a shoe or whatever, it's like he was giving you a gift, when you see people. So it could be something small, but maybe the doctor's orders out of this one are just like maybe get somebody a coffee, get somebody a gift, find something that they like, maybe a little card, maybe a little sticker, something small, nothing extravagant. But in honor of Atlas, if you're hearing this or sharing this, and let me know if you listen to this in the office or whatnot, or comments or email. I don't know how that works. I'm not a big podcaster. I'm not like, yeah, it's on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, or whatever, but I'm not going to pretend to be more important than I am. I'm just a guy, and that I'm going to, pass away one day as well. But hopefully we leave some lessons for those behind us, and that they can grow and better themselves and live their advantage life and enjoy and have some amazing stories. So be you, be happy to be here today, and bless somebody with a gift today. Those are your doctor's orders. Until next time, we'll talk soon.